The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress 2 Logic, your host. And I have a very deep connection to South Haven, Michigan. It is one of my absolute favorite places on the planet. And my family has been going there since at least 100 years ago. So I have a picture of my great-great-grandmother, and on the back of it, it says South Haven, and it says 1919 or 1920. And what used to happen back in the day when my father was a child and teenager, the family would take a ferry boat across the lake from the Chicago area, and he and his grandfather would drive around in a 1936 Chevy so that the family would have a car while they were on vacation. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my dad said, "Hey, I want to show you where I went on a vacation as a kid." We went there, we stayed at a resort, and fell in love, and we have been going back almost every summer since. I'm 51, so that's 44 years. So I've been going there for about 44 years. I was there over Father's Day weekend, and I saw a pamphlet that I absolutely loved. And I said, "Oh my goodness, this is great. It's going to be great for my show." There was also, these people were at Harbor Fest, and I probably walked right by them and was unconscious. And I didn't realize that, or I would have talked to them there. So back at the hotel, there was a pamphlet of the South Haven Ambassadors Program and Education, and they are all about water safety. And because this is summertime, I thought it would be a great safety segment of the show to bring on an expert and talk about how to be safe in the water. So I have Heather Johnson. Heather, thank you for joining the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So if anyone is a history buff, the Great Lakes formed by glaciers that were going south. And can you tell everyone what is the most dangerous body of water statistically?
Statistically, the most dangerous body of water for the Great Lakes is Lake Michigan.
Why is that?
Because it's a really long shoreline, and within that shoreline there's a lot, it's really populated, and so we get a lot of tourists to that lake specifically. And then we also have dangerous currents, so the winds typically will go north to south, and when that happens, the wind will push that water down to the south end of Lake Michigan, which is Chicago, South Haven, all of our West Michigan areas. We also have Michigan City, New Buffalo, Indiana, all of these different places that get really populated with tourists. But we also have our locals that swim there regularly as well. So when those winds push that water all down to the bottom of the lake, it will then reverberate back. And then there's really dangerous currents that are formed within that.
How far out are the currents? Are they right up to the shore?
So we have longshore currents, we have rip currents, and then structural currents. And so the rip currents mainly are around where the sandbars are going to be. A longshore current can form in between the sandbar and shore. It can also form along that sandbar or on the opposite side of that sandbar. And then a structural current can actually go right up against those piers. So a longshore can form into a structural current, kind of goes into the pier and then follows the pier out.
Very good. So can you tell everyone, what is the South Haven Ambassadors?
So South Haven Ambassadors Program and Education is a grassroots style nonprofit. We are a 501c3. We have roughly 15 ambassadors in South Haven, and we have a chapter also in Holland. And we go out on the beach in a towel-to-towel beachside education format with our brochures, our Water Watcher wristbands, and Water Watcher cards to explain the wristbands. And we talk to everyone that we see out on the beach and about the rip currents, about the longshore currents, structural currents, offshore winds. We talked to them also about the flag system, because our flag system may be different from a flag system that they are used to out on an ocean or a state park beach. And then we also talk about our local code ordinances, because they do have some fines that are put in place to try to keep people out of the water on red flag days and off the piers on treacherous days. So with those fines, a lot of folks come into South Haven and they don't know about them. So we also talk about those kinds of things, as well as dogs being on the beach, no smoking or drinking, that kind of a thing. We give them all of the safety and educational information that they need to know about our beaches so that they can have a safe, fun experience while they're in South Haven.
Terrific. So how did the program start?
I started the program after Anthony Deal and Elijah Britt drowned off of our North Beach in 2022. Anthony, he was the uncle to 5 of his nieces and Elijah, and they were in the water and got into trouble with a rip current. Anthony went in and saved all 5 of the girls and went back for Elijah, and unfortunately was unsuccessful in recovering Elijah and also lost his life in the process. I typically don't go to the beach when there's things like that happening. We kind of stay away from that. We let our first responders, who are our friends and our family here locally, take care of those incidents and give them space to do that. But for some reason, everybody was calling me and telling me about what was happening down there, which was unprecedented. So I ended up going down and around the beach. Something called me to pull into a spot. I ended up staying until about 11:30 at night, watching the rescue recovery from the South Beach that was happening on North Beach. And when I first pulled in, I watched the beach, and Elijah's stepmom, collapsed on the beach, just devastated and broken. And as a mother, that touched me. And so I immediately called around to try to find out who the leaders in Great Lakes water safety is, because it's a far cry from ocean safety. So I wanted to find out who was doing it for the Great Lakes. And I ended up finding Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. I also found the Great Lakes Water Safety Consortium, a few other different organizations. My good friend Pam Ford here in South Haven has been a part of water safety for a while. So I touched base with everyone and decided that an ambassadorship was the way to go. And then 2 weeks later, Emily McDonald and Corey Ernster passed away while I was at a dentist appointment with my daughter. And so at that moment, I decided I need some volunteers. I need some people that are going to be out there and take my place in the instance that I can't be out there. So that way we can get this information into as many hands as possible.
It's absolutely terrific. So on the beaches, they don't have lifeguards out when it's like a red flag day, do they?
We don't have lifeguards here in South Haven.
At all?
No, we don't. Nope, not a one. We did have them. We had them for about 50 plus years, and they went away in 2001. City Council voted to eliminate the program.
Wow, I was not aware of that. Okay, so basically you're on your own if you go to Okay, that makes perfect sense. And so the local fire department, I'm sure they have a water rescue division. Back home when I was in public safety, I actually went out on boats and trained for rescue recovery, that type of thing. I was the photographer, but it was a lot of fun because one of our people would go in the water and feign like they are drowning, and then we'd have to rescue them with the boat, pull them in, do the medical stuff. And they were perfectly okay. They weren't really drowning, but they played the role of a victim. When there's a drowning and it probably is offshore a little ways, the Coast Guard sometimes responds. And over here on this side of the lake, it's a long response time because as far as I remember, the helicopter comes out of Muskegon. What is the Coast Guard's response time to South Haven?
It depends. St. Joseph is where our current Coast Guard kind of positions themselves in order to be able to make it to our beaches. So we don't have, our local auxiliary doesn't house a boat here. It's all comes from St. Joseph. So it depends on if there's somebody stationed. It depends on what the weather conditions are, what the lake conditions are before they can respond. I know that locally, our local fire department does have their rescue teams, and their rescue time is between 3 and 5 minutes.
Which is terrific. That is a great rescue time.
Actually, in the response time world of water emergency, you can drown in less than 30 seconds.
Right.
The sooner the better. 3 to 5 minutes, that's typical for somebody that's in a drowning situation and a water emergency. That's typically going to be somebody that's already submerged. So we really need to have lifeguards out here on the beaches.
Right.
That way they are the first, immediate response to somebody having a water emergency, because that 3 to 5 minutes is way too long for a water emergency.
Why were they voted to discontinue the program? Or why was it voted to discontinue?
I have done some research on this, and I found that there used to be, so we have Parks and Recreation, right? Every town does. So our local Parks and Recreation was underneath a program called CREC. And CREC not only housed the Parks and Rec program, but they also housed the lifeguarding program, along with a lot of our public schools sports. So with that, the city needed to cut the budget. And so they originally asked to cut the information center at our local police station. And then what they did was the city kind of, all of the community members kind of went up in an uproar about getting rid of that information center. And so they said, well, then something has to go. And that something was the lifeguard program. And that was voted on by the city council to do away with at that time.
So was funding. Can you talk about what the color codes of the flags mean?
Sure. So you have green, yellow, and red here in South Haven on our beaches. We have 7 public beaches. Most of them have that flag system being utilized, with our beach enforcement attendants changing those out as they see fit. And each color, so green means that the conditions are calm, they're favorable for a good time. Definitely be cautious about changing conditions, but they're typically fairly reasonable to be able to enjoy the lake. A yellow flag means that there is an inherent risk of currents that could pose a danger to you or to somebody that you're with, and that you need to exercise extreme caution when going into the water, and make sure that you're definitely paying attention to that flag system and the changing weather conditions. Winds also play a big part in that. So pay attention to the winds and the direction of the winds, because sometimes you can get some offshore winds and things like that on green and on yellow. Not just green and yellow, but also red too. And so the red will actually be for the city of South Haven. That means that the lake is closed. You are not to go in that water. Even a toe in the water will get you $1,000 fine per city code ordinance. They are just trying to keep people safe and out of the water. We've had a lot of drownings here in South Haven. And so part of that is keeping people out when we know that there are currents that are forming all up and down the lake shore. Sometimes they'll close off one part of the beach because there's a more inherent risk at that section than there is at other sections. And that's typically near the piers where we have the structural currents that form fairly often.
So how does someone like me, who is colorblind, know the colors of the flags?
That's a really great question. I would say that you should ask somebody around you.
Good answer.
Whether you're down at the lake shoreline or you're up in the parking lot getting parked and paid for, definitely ask anybody that you can spot, so that way they can tell you, and definitely do that throughout the day. There's a lot of people out on that beach. I'm sure there's somebody there that can tell you, hey, what color is the flag right now? And I'm sure they'd be so kind to tell you.
Well, the funny thing is I have to do the same thing when I shop for clothing. I'm serious. I've come home with pink stuff. I thought it was white. Not that I don't care. I have pink stuff on. Anyway, segueing into a joke. Can you, before we take a little break, can you talk about what the Red Flag Day Park Party is?
Yeah, so our Red Flag Day park parties were created to try to get more water safety education out into the community. So, but we also wanted to do something kind of away from the lake and show people that there's things that you can do in the city of South Haven that's not on the beach. So if you have a red flag happening, there's a lot of really great Red Flag Day discounts that are given out throughout town. And a lot of people don't know that. And so our Red Flag Day Park Party was really just geared to try to get more of that water safety education out there and get people away from the beach so that they can see, all of the great things that we offer. We do a Capture the Red Flag tournament. We have water safety education booths with the Van Buren County Marine Unit and the U.S. Coast Guard. talking about life jackets and throwing life rings and all that good stuff. And then we have Safe Kids of Greater South Haven that comes in and does water safety right along with us. And so it's really just a great way to kind of get people into the park, get them out from in front of their screens, have a play day in the park playing Capture the Flag, doing some really great things with the Mitten Children's Museum and their water safety make and take crafts and all that good stuff. And then we also did that at Stanley Johnston Park because we wanted to also draw business to our ladies over there who own businesses that kind of get the short end of the stick sometimes during the summers. A lot of the great places downtown get a lot of that business. And so we wanted to kind of draw some attention to our ladies over there to get them some kind of business during the summer as well.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a small break. And when we come back, we'll be continuing the conversation about water safety. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRES2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. We are continuing the conversation with Heather Johnson from South Haven Ambassadors, which is a water safety educational organization. And I'm going to start off this segment with a little story and then a confession. Please don't judge me, Heather. Okay. So my mom always said that she had a, quote, slip disc or herniated disc. So she never carried anything heavy. And when we would go down to the beach, we would rent a condominium right on the beach. And here I am, a teenager. I've got a tube over my head, kind of like a beauty pageant sash. Over my head, I got a 2-man inflatable rubber boat, and I'm holding it with one hand, and then I've got her bag with the other, and I'd have to go back for the air mattress. So I was the mule, but not the drug kind of mule. I was just the workhorse. And some of my fond memories of these vacations involved my sister, myself, and my father doing what we called, quote, jumping waves. And that's my confession. I probably entered the water on red flag days, and I'm here to talk about it, but I don't recommend it. Now I'm an adult. I was a kid back then, so I didn't understand the severe danger that Lake Michigan has. I understand that now, and I wouldn't do that today, but we used to go in, one of us would hold an inner tube, someone else would sit in it, and we would just ride the waves, sometimes surf them in. So that's my confession. Heather, please don't judge me. I did have a good time, but I totally understand now that I'm a safety professional what not to do, which was that.
Yeah, definitely no judgment at all. Everybody here in South Haven that has been a local, I can say most of us instead of everybody, but most of us have done the same thing. Grow up next to the lake, you kind of learn it a little bit faster than those that don't. And so you know where to go, where you're not at immediate danger from a pier or right. from a rip current, that kind of a thing. You know where to go. All kind of played in those waves. And it's a good time, but never, ever, ever will we suggest that anybody really goes and does that unless they have the proper gear in order to do that. Like our kite surfers and, our surfer community, they go out, they play in that, but they are tethered to their flotation device. And so they have special, special requirements that they have to abide by in order to be out there. So definitely be safe when you go out into playing with the waves, and hopefully it's surfing or kiteboarding.
Very good. So one of my fears, this is the new question that I have for you, is being on the beach when there is a seiche. Can you explain what a seiche is and maybe some safety tips around one?
A seiche is actually, it's a wave or a meta tsunami. So if you think of a tsunami, how it kind of pulls that water out and then brings it all back in at the same time to make bigger, larger waves that kind of come in out of nowhere. A seiche is kind of a mini version of that. And so if you're standing on the beach and all of a sudden, you start to notice like the waves are actually kind of going out and not coming back in like they really should be, you're going to see a seiche. And sometimes those seiches can come out of nowhere. They'll come around storms and things like that. We do get storm surges. We just had a storm surge with the latest storm that just came through. So yeah, it's winds are typically more important to the seiche motion. And then the pressure, of that then plays a role in forming that seiche. So if you're standing on the beach, that could come up and it could very quickly pull you out and away from shore.
Absolutely. And when I worked for the Glencoe Police and Fire Department, it's on Lake Michigan, but the other side, or my side, so to speak, and there was a seiche. And one of the public safety lieutenants saw it, knew exactly what it was, and got on his loudspeaker and told everyone to clear off the beach. And I really believe that he saved lives by doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And they're also kind of limited sometimes to partially or fully enclosed basins of lakes. So Lake Erie is really going to be more so prominent with the seiche than I would say some of the other Great Lakes.
Interesting. I did not know that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk and ask you, how does swimsuit color figure into safety?
So if you think about it, I have on our website and on our Facebook page a color chart, and a color chart of the different types of bathing suits and what they look like in a light colored bottom pool and a dark colored bottom pool, and then what it looks like in the lake. And it's a far cry of what it looks like in a lake. So if you think about it, the light is reflecting all kinds of different angles in the lake. And so it makes it harder for you to be seen when you're in the lake versus when you're in a pool. In a pool, it's a very contained entity, so that light is kind of controlled. So you're going to be able to see a little bit better in those pools than you are going to be the lake, but always a bright color when you're in any body of water is going to be easier to be seen in case you get in a water emergency than a darker color, because think about how you're going to blend in with the surrounding. If you have a black bathing suit on, you're going to really blend in with the lake bed bottom because the light can't get to the bottom of the lake sometimes. So people aren't going to be able to easily see you. So you definitely want to have a lighter colored bathing suit. And that always plays a part in people being able to see you, which then plays a part in your safety and how quickly you're recovered.
What is some valuable information to know before you go to the beach?
So when you go to the beach, you're definitely going to want to, first and foremost, before you even leave your house, you want to check the weather. You want to check the flag status if there's flags on your beaches. You want to check if there's a buoy. Like South Haven, we have a buoy that's offshore here that's placed by the steelheaders, and they collect data, and that data is easily accessible by anyone. There's a text that you can send for that. You want to absolutely have a life jacket with you. You want to, when you get to the beach, you want to read all of the signs. You want to make sure that your family knows a good exit strategy for a water emergency, and that is float to live. So if there's any kind of a water emergency that you're getting into, flip over on your back and float until a first responder or somebody can throw something that floats to you in order to help you float. You're going to stay away from piers. You're going to stay away from the no swim zones. You're going to keep a close eye on your kids. We always stay within arm's reach of your kids. whether they have a life jacket on or not, it's always best to stay within arm's reach. That way you're in a quick response to whatever kind of water emergency they get into. You're definitely not going to be wanting to dig holes in the sand or anything like that. Sand is very heavy and it can collapse very easily. So beach safety also comes into play with water safety. And so definitely don't be digging holes in the beach. And then you want to also know to throw, don't go. So if you see a family member that's in a water emergency, throw something that floats. We always say if there's not an immediate life ring near you, find something that floats, a cooler, a beach ball, an inflatable, a pool noodle, those kinds of things float. And so that can actually help to save somebody's life if you throw that. Absolutely do not try to go in the water to try to save that person. Most of the time would-be rescuers become victims themselves. And you don't want to go home with two less in your party. You want to make sure that everybody is safe and saved. And so definitely don't go in the water to try to save anyone. Throw something that floats and call 911. And then, you're definitely going to want to quiz your family a little bit on what the water risks are. There are all kinds of different currents in our lakes. We have rip currents, we have longshore currents, structural currents. Those longshore currents can then go into those structural currents, and then you'll have a double current there. And then you'll also want to watch the wind direction. Offshore winds and inflatables are not your best friend. They go really, really fast off of shore when we have offshore winds. So definitely all of those things are things that you want to look at in order to make an informed and educated decision on if you're going to even go to the beach. And if you do go to the beach, if you're going to get in the water. And then if you do go in the water, it's going to give you an educated decision-making process when you're in the water to know that if you get in a water emergency, you know an exit strategy.
Very good. That brought up several more questions that I'm going to grill you on, or comment on, I should say. First of all, if an individual is throwing a life preserver or something and it has a rope onto it, hold on to the end of the rope. Don't just throw the whole thing. And I know that's a common sense thing, but in an emergency, someone might not realize that. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.